With this offseason and with the draft coming up, we all know that the O-line is by far the most important thing that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to wrap up and they need to fix. There's a ton of quarterback issues as well, and if I sit down here and talk about all the QB headlines that we've had, I'll be sitting down here until Christmas 2075, but that's just besides the point. But I think that there's one thing that a lot of people are sleeping on with the Pittsburgh Steelers that was kind of an issue for why the defense was a little, I don't want to call it underwhelming, but it wasn't as physical as what it was in years past. And I think that starts with the defensive line and using the depth on the defensive line and what, quite frankly, I think Omar Khan has to patch up a little bit, throw in a little bit more slabs of cement with free agency and the draft coming up as well. And let's talk about it. What is going on, everybody? I am Mac, back with another video Thursday morning. As always, do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, follow on Instagram, link down in the box below. So I'm going to be talking about the defensive line a little bit in this video, and there's two players in particular that I think are pretty underutilized that the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would quite honestly like to see more on the field with 2024. And overall, just like I said, patch-up work as far as depth and the defensive line goes. My first guy is Armon Watts. Armon Watts, when he was brought over here, I thought he was going to make a real good impact with us. And with an interior defensive line play that this guy has, you'd think he'd play a more pivotal role. But, you know, in his career, he's played in 57 games and he's only started 23 games. I look at a guy who is still relatively young. He's 27 years old. He's a little bit younger than I am. Like I said, I see a guy who has a ton of potential. But I think the biggest reason why we're not seeing him a whole lot is because he's on that line and he's behind guys like Cam Heyward, like Larry Ogunjobi, and like Benton now, who, to their credit, they are all, I would say, the meat of that defensive line. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to consistently keep Armon Watts on the bench, and you don't have to, keep him in the garage all this time. And with a franchise like the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a proud defensive franchise, and they're looking for that next Mean Joe Green lineage on that defensive line, or, finding the next Cam Heyward or whoever. You get the point. They're looking for that next big guy on that defensive line to carry out that tradition. And I see this Armon Watts guy who creates a lot of penetration. He gets a lot of backfield play. He wins on the inside matchups, knows how to seal the run. He makes a huge impact that frees up a lot of space on the defensive line so everyone can chip in and do their part. And he gets off of blocks as well. And that he needs to be allowed to do that for two reasons. Because, first of all, Cam Heyward, for as great as he is and for as good and for as pivotal of a player that he is with the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's face it, the guy's just not getting any younger. This is going to be, his 13th, 14th season with us? The guy's in his early to mid-30s. So you'd think that this would be a good time to have Armon Watts learn from him so that way he can become that next guy that the Steelers are looking for on that defensive line, that next leader. And the second thing is because of Larry Ogunjobi. Now, Larry Ogunjobi's been a really good player for us ever since we brought him in here a couple years ago. And I love to see Larry Ogunjobi up on that defensive line, but he hasn't been completely healthy with us. He's missed some time. But like I said, overall, he's a good playmaker. And I think Armon Watts and Larry Ogunjobi complement this defensive line very well. And if you put him in as part of a rotation, I'll take that as well. But the main thing is that I want to see more of Armon Watts on this defensive line. And my second guy that I think a lot of Steeler fans can agree with as well is Montravius Adams. You want to talk about a cat that just gets after players. He makes plays. He's physical, gets to the backfield, bullies running backs, ruins routes, disrupts screens. I think that's Montravius Adams. And for the time that we saw him on the field for 2023, he was living up to all those things that I just talked about with Montravius Adams. I mean, this is just a pure playmaker on this defensive line who really doesn't get the recognition, not just from the Steelers fan base that he deserves, but from the NFL too. There's not a lot of pundits out there that talk about this guy, not a lot of non-Steeler fans who talk about this guy. And like I said, honestly, I think this guy deserves a lot more recognition and credit that he gets because he's just, he plays like a Pittsburgh Steeler, you know? And the thing with him, he's still pretty young too. The guy's my age. He's 28 years old. He still has a ton of time to go with his career. So I say put him in a rotation or put him up in more starts as well and use your depth, because if you're acquiring all this depth and you're getting all this depth with the front office and you're not using it, that is not good. You have to use some of this defensive line depth, and the Steelers have a ton of it on their hands. Now, granted, with the defensive line, I still want us to get some youth on this defensive line, which is why I want us to go defensive line at some point in the draft as well. But with this defense going forward, how everyone calls it, a top 10 defense in the league, and with the way Omar Khan slaps the table and the way that Omar Khan has much more of a trigger finger than Kevin Colbert has had in free agency, I would love for the Pittsburgh Steelers to go after either a free agent with the defensive line, someone who's on the market, or like I said, overall, get youth on this defensive line. Like a Calais Campbell type. I'd love to have Calais Campbell on here, but I don't think he's necessarily going to be the number one guy for us. It's not like it's the headlines of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or anything. But still, this is one thing that I want to see the Pittsburgh Steelers go after in free agency and with the draft. O-line, definitely. Quarterback, we'll see how that goes. Secondary, specifically corner and opposite of Minkah, exactly, definitely. But don't rule out that defensive line. I want to see it make it happen. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below about the defensive line and what I said. This is Mac checking on out for the day. Have a good one, everybody.